Hi, my name's Kyle. Today, I'm just going to tell you a story. It all starts, well, I'd say it probably started when before I could remember, actually, because I was raised in church, and I know they started taking me right after I was born. So I guess my earliest memories would be in church. Used to play with Legos and Hot Wheels cars on the hard wooden pews at the Church of the Nazarene in New Matamoros, Ohio, built in 1953. My grandmother was the Sunday school teacher. My mother was the church pianist. And my grandfather did the announcements and took up the offering and was good for the occasional Sunday morning joke. I never missed a Sunday or even a Wednesday, I don't believe, maybe very, very, very few if I missed any, till I was right around 16. I was actually, let's back up a little, I was homeschooled. That plays a little part in this story. I was homeschooled from the time I started going to school until my freshman year in high school. We lived in an area where internet was unavailable, and if there's anyone watching this that's young, that's not going to compute with them. But there was a time, we'll call them the dark ages, when internet was not available to people that lived in rural areas. And the only option as far as curriculums for homeschooling in that rural area past 8th grade was online. And we tried it, and the internet was too slow to do it. And at that time, my mother and I talked, and we made the decision that I would go to the local public school. I'd never been to public school before, obviously, and growing up, I had two friends. They were both church friends, and they were both younger than me. And I went to public school, and for my freshman year, I stayed pretty true to my faith. I showed up day one wearing a Coca-Cola font "Worship Jesus Christ" bright red t-shirt, and instantly made piles of friends. Everybody loved it. Just kidding. It was rough. It was rough starting out. Didn't really have any friends to begin with, but ended up making like 4 or 5 really good friends. Invited them to church. They were into it. They came to the Church of the Nazarene, New Matamoros, Ohio. And that was the narrative for a little while. We'd go to church. We'd hang out at my grandma's afterward. We'd eat Sunday dinner. And it was all cool. And then sophomore summer, it'd be the summer before my sophomore year, I guess you would call it, I kind of like grew up a little bit, if you will, but not in the best way, I guess. I just kind of became more outgoing, like more of that introvert homeschool kind of washed off of me, and I kind of turned into who more I am today. I was turned into the extrovert, and I went back to school, and I was making more friends, and I ended up meeting a girl, and I'd never had a girlfriend before. And in a typical, sadly, it's a typical American, probably all over the world really, but a typical story, things just escalated really, really fast. And I was late 15. I wasn't even 16 yet. And we just went 0 to 120. And that's when I kind of started falling away from walking in God's will for my life, walking close with Christ. And that was really the first step that I took. I'd never smoked. I'd never smoked weed. I'd never smoked cigarettes. I'd never drank alcohol. I never did any of that. And shortly after that time, I got more popular, and I kind of fell in with everybody, really. I just kind of was like a click jumper. I never was into sports, but I'd hang out with the jocks, and I was never a brainiac, but I'd hang out with those people, and I was friends with everybody. And I started getting invited to parties, and started partying a little bit, and I didn't even drink. Actually, I kind of forgot about this till I started telling this story. I didn't drink at all until I graduated high school. I never smoked until, I'm hazy on this, I might have started smoking weed right before I graduated, but it was really close to the end. And I graduated, and so now we're back to that part where I never missed a Sunday or a Wednesday till I was about 16. So met the girl, got a bunch of friends, started falling away from Christ. And 16, 17, started smoking weed, good bit of weed, and then started drinking. And that pretty much just followed suit for the next ballpark 13 years. I just drank and smoked and partied for a long time. And I grew up riding dirt bikes, and I really enjoyed that. And I had fallen into a job where I was in sales, and I actually got to sell motorcycles and four-wheelers and ATVs and side-by-sides and stuff that I was really super passionate about. And I made good money doing it. And I was there for like 2 months before I was right on par with salesmen that had been there for a long time, really excelled in this field. And they started moving me up. And I was in sales there for 3.5 years, and they promoted me to sales manager. And I did that for 4 years. And in that time, they would send me all over the country to these different dealer meetings in which you would learn about the product, the new product coming out, anything they wanted you to do differently. But there was always, one major thing in common with all of them, and they were a party. It was, the second you walk through the door, free alcohol, nicest rooms, and now you're bumping elbows with dudes with big money. And I just ate it up. Like, I fell into it, and I was that extrovert. I was loud, I was outgoing, and made a lot of quick friends, if you will, in those situations. And started, it's crazy to look back on it, but I remember the first trip I ever went on, they sent me to Indianapolis, and we did the dealer meeting, did everything we were supposed to do, met all the requirements and everything. But the second that meeting was over, it was like 7 p.m. There was a gentleman that we had met, and he was like, "Come on, let's go, we're going out." And I was like, "Okay, cool, let's go." So I remember we went to the strip club, and that guy went in there, and he started throwing money like I didn't know existed. He was giving us money. We were running the place, basically. And I remember we were there until they shut it down. And then we went back to the hotel, slept for a couple hours, got up, did the meetings the next day, and went right back out to the same place and did it again. I think in 2 nights, for just between the three of us, I think we spent like, I don't even want to say. It was an absurd amount of money, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was absurd. Actually, I'm not proud of this, but we went there, and when I walked in, I told all the girls there that I was a race car driver and that the guy with me was my mechanic that built my motors. And they believed it, and he just jived in right with me, and we went with that story the rest of the time. But during that time in that job, they sent me all over the country, California, Texas. I got roofied in San Antonio, actually. I forgot about that. I went out to a bar after one of those dealer meetings, and I remember walking in, everything was cool, and I know I didn't drink too much because I'd actually hardly drank. Like, the meeting was just over, and we walked in, and I got a vodka cranberry and sat it down there on the bar, and I was talking to girls or something. I don't know what I was doing. And then I finished that drink, and I just remember things just kind of like went away, and then I don't remember anything. And thank God, literally thank you, Lord, that the person I was there with didn't even drink. She was actually just a middle-aged woman that had, I think, 3 or 4 kids, and she was part of our company, and they sent her to oversee the bookwork side of things. I'm not really sure, but she just wanted to go out and see San Antonio, and she ended up, we were the only people there, and we just ended up going together. And I walked down the next morning. Well, I woke up the next morning, actually. This is rough. I woke up the next morning face down on my bed in the hotel room, naked, with my left eye cut, like on my like it was cut open right here, and there was like blood on the pillow, and I had no recollection of what had happened. So I walked into the bathroom and I opened the door, and it was like a scene from Jaws. Like there was this red all over the place with like, I was like, what's going on in here? Like it freaked me out bad because I had no recollection of what was going on. Well, it was vodka and cranberry, and everything that I had eaten, I had thrown up. And I had thrown up all over my pants, and I had thrown up on my shirt. And like I said, I had no recollection of this. And so I'm like in panic mode. I have like 20 minutes to make it to this like super important meeting that they sent me to do. And I clean up all my stuff real fast, as I can. And I get dressed, and I just remember being insanely sick. I'd never felt that sick. And I went downstairs and I said, what happened last night? And she looked at me and she said, you don't remember? I said, I don't remember a thing. And she was like, that makes total sense. She said, I brought you back to your room last night, and have a good night. And she said, you were sitting down there at that bar, and you were laughing, joking, being your normal self, and all of a sudden you just went and got super quiet and super awkward. And you were like, I think I should go home now. And she said, no, I think we should walk back to the hotel now. So thank the Lord for her, but who knows what could have happened that night. She told me later on that there was a couple guys in the bar that were super sketchy, and they were kind of like watching us. And I gave off the impression at that time that I probably had a good bit of money on me or something, and who knows what could have happened. I mean, it could have been really bad. And there's countless stories like that. I mean, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of that party lifestyle. And that was just on alcohol and weed. Then I got to the point where that wasn't enough. I was always trying to fill this void I had. And I started dabbling in acid. I started doing acid, going on acid trips. I remember one time I took acid with some buddies out like in the middle of the woods, and I thought it was a good idea. The wind was blowing. It was at night. I thought it was a good idea to climb this tree. I climbed this tree up on this ridgeline like 70 feet in the air, and I remember getting to the top of it and just like swaying in the wind, thinking it was where I ought to be. And then I was like, how am I going to get down out of here? And it's times I look back when I tell these stories, and it's, my grandma and my mom, and I'm sure a pile of other people were praying for me the whole time. And there's no way I should have been hurt a lot of times. And I never was. Thank the Lord. I remember driving home on back roads, so faded. Some people, you can't hardly hold your eye open. You're trying to get your truck home, and you don't even remember getting home. You walk out the next morning, and you're like, oh my gosh, is my truck out here? And there it is. And I just fell into a place like that where I just partied hard for, like I said, probably 13 years. And then I ended up getting divorced. That was a mess in itself. There was some bad situations that happened in the family, and she fell into a place with alcohol that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, because I never considered myself an alcoholic through this entire trip, this entire journey. I never considered myself an alcoholic because I never missed work. I never wrecked a car. I never went to jail. I never got a DUI. I never hurt anybody in my mind. And so therefore I was just functioning and doing my thing. So I never thought I was an alcoholic, but there was a whole nother side of that I got to see, that, it affects people in different ways, and it's not good any which way it affects you, but it'll grab a hold of you before you know it, and it'll take you to a place that you don't know how to get out of, and it'll take you there fast. And so I got a divorce, and I wasn't interested in anything as far as relationship wise or anything like that. But during this entire time that I was wayward, if you will, I always knew that God was there. Like, he never left me. I always felt his presence, and I always knew that I should go back. I always knew that would be what I needed to do to turn this thing around. And it was always like a call, like a drawing on me. And I got into this habit where I would always keep some people around me that were just a little bit worse than I was. So therefore I would think, oh, like, I still pray. Like I still talk to God, and I still know, and God still loves me. And those people are really the ones that are living bad. I would compare myself to these other people that were just a little bit worse than me. And wow, how deceived I really was. And so I left that situation. I was still working at the bike shop I was working at, and living on my own now in a camper that I had bought, me and my dog. And all of a sudden, like I said, I wasn't looking for anything, but I was like, man, I really need to go back to church. Like it hit me hard. And I started listening to contemporary Christian music, and that's where it started. And I started feeling the presence of God, like in my truck. I always loved to sing, and I would just be singing, and I would just feel Him. And I'm like, I've been running for a long time. Maybe it's time to go back. So I went back to church, and in the meantime, a girl started working at the place I was working, and my boss, I was running around doing some stuff, and he said, hey Kyle, come here, I want to introduce you to somebody. And I was half irritated about it. I was just trying to get my job done. That place, there was people coming in and out all the time. So he took me over and he said, hey, this is Jessica. She's our new hire. And this sounds crazy, but it's as true as anything. I turned and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we locked eyes. And there was this unbelievable feeling that came over me, like I'd been reunited with somebody that I had never even met before. I didn't understand it at the time, but I saw it on her face too. And it hit me in such a way that I was perplexed by it. And I went home and I started praying about it. I was like, God, what's the deal here? Like, I just got out of something. I'm not looking for anything. I just want to try to get this thing figured out. Maybe get back to knowing you a little bit and ride dirt bikes. And it was like, just kept like, go to church. That kept resonating in me. And so I decided to go to church, and I pulled into the parking lot. I listened to contemporary Christian music the whole way there. Like I said, I love to sing. And at this point, I was still out there, man. I was still drinking, still smoking weed. And I was like, you know what? I love singing. I love smoking weed. I'm just going to smoke some weed, and then I'm going to go in here to church and sing. It's going to be great. And so I got high in my truck in the parking lot, and I walked in and I sat in the third row in, and all the way on the left-hand side up against the wall. And worship started. And they started singing, and I started singing. At first I started singing, just whatever, going through the motions. And then, man, it just started getting real in there. Like I started feeling the presence of God come over me. And then I started singing. And I mean, I was starting to break down. Like I was praising God and just thinking about where I'd been and everything I'd done and why, and how many times He had kept me from checking out early. And in that moment, I've never felt like this since, and I never felt like this before, but the presence of God came on me so hard that it was almost like a physical weight. And I knew that if I left that building without getting right and getting serious with Him and truly rededicating my life to Him and being born again for real, because I was saved 100 times growing up in church. I was baptized when I was 13 years old in the swimming pool at my house. It was never real. It was never serious. Not like this. And I knew in some incredible way that I can't explain to this day that if I walked out of that place without doing that, I truthfully don't believe I'd be here today. I had a feeling just come over me, and it was almost like God said, it's time. You're done. You've done enough. Just come back to me now. And I really believe that if I would have walked out of that building and not rededicated, that it would have been a really different story. And maybe I wouldn't. I'm not saying I'd have walked out and got hit by a truck, but I'm saying maybe things, all those times that I narrowly escaped it, maybe those would have started going the other direction. Maybe my life would have turned a different way. Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here. I don't know. But I did that, and then very shortly after that, remember that girl I was telling you about? I started talking to her, and we started hanging out and just kind of really hit it off like instantly. And I remember the first night we ever actually hung out and talked, we were just like texting, and I said, "Hey, what are you into?" And she was like, "No, I'm sitting at Applebee's, just hanging out with some old friends." "What are you doing?" I was like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm sitting here at the house, I ain't doing nothing. And she said, "Why don't you come down and hang out?" And I don't think the text came all the way through, and I had the door locked behind me and fired up my 88 F-150 and just flat-footed that thing. Well, the funny part was I went to the wrong Applebee's. So I showed up and I went in there and she wasn't in there. And so I called her. I was like, "Hey, unless you aged like 30 years and gained like 180 pounds, you're not in here." And she laughed and she was like, "Where are you at?" And I told her, and I said, "Oh," she said, "You still coming?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be there in just a second." So it was like 30 minutes away. I just whipped up on the road and flat-footed it again. I was there in like 20 minutes and walked in, sat down, and we talked for 4 hours. And it was like, once again, I'd known her my whole life. And that connection was so real. So long story made short, we haven't been apart since. We were together for, I think, a year. Almost got ahead of myself. We were together for about a year, and we were sitting in the camper one night at the dinette, because in a camper, for all of you people that don't know much about campers, you don't have a kitchen table. You have a multi-purpose dinette in which you can eat at, and then like 30 minutes later, if you have company that's going to spend the night, you can just fold it down into a bed. So they call it a dinette. And we're sitting there talking one night, and before my wife had met me, she said she'd only been to church maybe like 3 times. She didn't have the background in it that I did. And we started talking. She starts asking me questions, about God and about Jesus and what did he do and why did he do it. And I can honestly tell you that this has never happened to me since, and it had never happened to me before. But sitting there talking to her, I was telling her all these things that I didn't even really know that I knew. As these words were coming out of my mouth, in the back of my mind, I was actively thinking as I was speaking, where's this coming from? And long story made short, about 3 hours later, probably close to 2 in the morning, I led her in the sinner's prayer right there at the dinette in the camper. And she was the first person I ever had the incredible privilege and honor of leading to Christ. And we started watching church online, and I was like, man, we need to find a church to go to. And I don't to this day know how this happened, but she found The Rock in Parkersburg, West Virginia with Pastor David Chisholm. And we started watching it online just a few times. And I said, man, we got to go. We got to go. This guy's fire. We got to go check this out. And we walked in, and it was like, it just almost felt like we were just at home almost instantly. And we went to that first church service, and we walked out of there, and we live about 45 minutes away. So we had the whole drive home to talk. And I told her, I said, this is church. Like, I feel like this is what church should be. I said, I grew up in it, and nothing against denominational churches, nothing against the church I grew up in, because it built the foundation that brought me back, but it didn't take me to where I understood how to have a relationship with Jesus. And we walked out of there knowing that that's where we were supposed to be, and that was what we were going to do. And I felt called to the ministry since I was 8 years old, and I ran from it. I ran really fast, and I ran really hard, and in an adrenaline-fueled rage, really, for a long time. And we started going to that church, and people started calling me out randomly that I'd never talked to about anything, that didn't know my background, and said, you've got a call on your life, and you need to stop running from God, and you need to step up, and you need to go in what he wants you to do. And I'm like, oh man, is it hot in here? Like, where's this coming from? And it happened multiple times over my wife and myself. So we are now in ministry school, and we are actively studying to show ourselves approved, to go wherever God wants to take us. And as I sit here and recall just a brief, man, we don't have, it'd take hours to drag you through all the stuff that I went through. But I can tell you that I've seen it and I've been there and I know what this world has to offer. When money's not an option and you can do whatever you want to do. I've experienced it all. And none of it will fill the hole that's inside of you that you're trying to fill. Mine was never filled until I let go of all of that and quit trying to fill it. When I quit trying to fill it, God, the creator of the universe, came down and met me where I was at. And he filled that place. And the only thing he asked for in return was all the broken junk that I'd been dragging around that I didn't know what to do with anyway. And so I gave it all to him, and he picked me up, and we've been walking together now to wherever he wants to take me. And I can tell you that 175 on a motorcycle is not as exciting as where we're going. And he's doing things that I never fathomed were possible. And I can't wait to see where it leads.